is the Jeff Santos Show.
33 minutes past the hour. It's the Jeff Santos Show. You tuned into. It is now time to go to the 206. Out west to a man who is nothing short of this Renaissance man that we always talk about. He's a musician. He's a journalist. He's an investigative reporter, and he's been on the streets of Seattle covering the protests, and unfortunately has been tear gassed, and unfortunately has seen the worst of the Seattle PD. But there are some reforms coming, hopefully sooner rather than later. Mark, happy Tuesday, my friend. How are you? I hope you're safe today.
I don't smell any pepper spray or tear gas at the moment, so the air is clear. But actually, there's been a huge change, Jeff. The Seattle police actually abandoned the East Precinct. So where these confrontations have been going on now for the last, 10, 11 days, and all of this tear gas and pepper spray and concussion grenades and everything else that the police have used, because they just got up and left after having so much criticism.
This was the mayor and presumably the city council too, saying we're going to close this, or was it the police themselves that said we don't want any part of this? How did that occur?
Yesterday was a city council meeting which I participated in and gave more public testimony, but during the afternoon, and believe me, the city council members are very, very angry at the Seattle Police Department, but the police chief herself, Carmen, actually held a press briefing. It lasted about, I'd say, 5 minutes, and said, we're going to try something different. And she didn't really have much to say. She justified the mass use of tear gas on Sunday night, and this was after Jenny Durkan and Police Chief Best had said it wasn't going to be used. In fact, Chief Best had announced a 30-day ban on the use of tear gas, which, by the way, this military-grade tear gas that's been used, like the CS gas, is banned as a chemical weapon by the Geneva Convention. So after they promised not to use it, then here it came out again, and that was the same day that a man drove his car into the crowd and brandishing a pistol and shot one of the protesters. That same evening, they opened up with massive amounts of tear gas again on Capitol Hill, filling the entire neighborhood with gas. So anybody, in their own homes were breathing it, just massive amounts. Apparently, the Seattle police are just addicted to this stuff, Jeff. They just love to use it. But in the middle of all of this, Carmen Best, whose job has been on the line, and there have also been calls for resignation for Jenny Durkan, our mayor, to resign.
Wow.
After all of that, the police actually hauled their stuff out of the East Precinct. We saw them gathering items from the precinct and putting them in cars and driving them away. The National Guard marched away and went to Volunteer Park, which is about a mile north of the area. And since then, a autonomous zone has been established where the protesters are basically setting up their own sort of community, autonomous zone, and it includes the area where the East Precinct is. All the windows are boarded up at the East Precinct, but the building is still there. There's been no fires that I know of. I haven't heard of any acts of vandalism or violence in the area. So interestingly enough, after 11 days of battling with the police, they decide to retreat or, just abandon the precinct, and guess what? No more confrontations, and everything seems to be very peaceful at the moment. So that's the situation on the ground.
That is great news, that it is peaceful. I mean, when you're talking to people, we're talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here, again, has been covering, he's got tear gas, pepper sprayed over the last week here, as we speak here on the Tuesday edition of the Jeff Santos Show. Do you sense, Mark, that the people that you have had a chance to talk to who are protesting are excited to see that in Minneapolis they're looking at an entirely potentially new way of policing and public safety, that LAPD, and the second largest city in America, has decided to cut a ton of funding toward the LAPD. I think New York is looking at it with de Blasio. This, to me, is remarkable for people aged 15 to 30 who have done this in 10 days, and we're seeing movements, and now you're telling me what's happening in Seattle. I mean, kudos to all those who have been protesting out there, peacefully protesting. We're seeing changes. I mean, closing East End police departments, those are the things that don't happen every day. So I think that's fantastic. I would imagine that Seattle being one of the most progressive cities in the country and across the world, frankly, they must be saying, well, look, if L.A. can do this, we certainly can do it. If Minneapolis is doing it, we can do it. I mean, is there a sense here of, I don't know if you want to call it city pride, but it is something that is saying, look, we have to do better than what we have seen, tear gases and pepper spray.
First of all, it's a very fluid situation, and nobody here really trusts the Seattle Police Department.
Right.
So,
I can hear you. Sure.
Yeah, because, the chief had promised not to use tear gas, and then they pulled it out, used copious amounts of it. She gave the excuse that, I didn't really say there was a ban. I said that try to stop using it, and it would only be used by, qualified SWAT team members or et cetera. Today, I don't smell it. It's not in the air. There is a sign at the Seattle Police Department now that says Seattle People Department. So somebody has covered over that. But here's the deal, Jeff. I attended 2 city council meetings. I testified at the Public Safety Committee meeting last Tuesday and then also, or last Wednesday, and then yesterday at the full council meeting, there was also a council briefing in the morning. So I sat in on this whole process, gave public testimony, offered a lot of information about the use of tear gas and so-called non-lethal, unquote, weaponry, which can be lethal if misused, especially to the city council. So I've been working directly with them to try to help stop the use of military-grade tear gas, rubber bullets, flashbang grenades, etc., on mostly peaceful protesters, because the Seattle police have always used the excuse that a couple plastic bottles thrown or a rock or something from 1 or 2 people justifies the cracking down on an entire crowd of thousands of people, including any bystanders, people trying to get home from work, people just trying to, be at home with their children. There's a really sad story, Jeff, unfortunately, at the Public Safety Committee meeting for the City Council last week, where a man testified that his 3-month-old infant was having respiratory distress because of the tear gas that was everywhere in the air.
Oh, wow.
And you can't escape it. When they use that much, it just fills up the entire area of the city, and it happened on Saturday. Also, of the first week when, the entire downtown area was full of clouds of tear gas. Well, the amount of tear gas that was used on Monday night is just incredible. It filled up the entire neighborhood. At one point, the visibility was absolutely zero. And it is really deleterious, let's say, to your respiratory system. So having been exposed to it multiple times, I'm not enjoying that. The lasting effects...
I guess not. Nobody would. Jeez.
But the city council is actually now saying, and this is the proposal from Kshama Sawant, we're going to have...
who also got pepper sprayed, right?
Yeah, correct. Sunday night when the tear gas came out yet again. And she's going to be giving a talk at the park later today. It's going to be a community town hall about banning tear gas. So I'm going to be there. And then she's proposed a banning on tear gas, rubber bullets, flashbang grenades. Just already, the Seattle Council yesterday voted unanimously a resolution to, quote, demilitarize the police, which means that it's not going to be interested in more of these devices that, kind of started in Seattle in a lot of ways. The model for the militarization of police was Seattle especially during the WTO protests. That's the first time we saw
right.
The body armor, the shields, the big truncheons, the big riot sticks, and armored personnel. Overuse of tear gas, pepper spray, flashbang grenades, rubber bullets, all of that. I helped write, and I did write an article actually for National Lawyers Guild report on the militarization of police in Seattle is that model. So I'm very familiar with all this, which is why I'm offering my expertise to the city council at the moment, because they seem to be the only ones who really want change. The mayor has been booed. There have been calls for her resignation. People are saying, here we go, another so-called progressive who runs as a progressive, and then once they get into office, they cater to all the large corporate interests and become the neoliberals that allow the police to tear gas everyone. So people have had a little bit enough of that. There's a move to defund the Seattle police. That's Teresa Mosqueda, another very progressive member of the Seattle City Council, who basically the City Council is just fed up, Jeff. They don't think that the police department can be reformed. So much like what's happening in Minneapolis, they're willing to try some new models, and the first thing they would like to do is demilitarize the police. And that, I think, would go a long ways in stopping the conflict, because the big problem in Seattle for many years has been when the police show up looking so militarized and all of these weaponry and stuff, it really does incite the crowd. I mean, it just immediately creates a sense of tension in the air. The idea behind crowd control is to actually allow people to protest safely. And these issues of filling entire neighborhoods with chemical agents, which are banned by the Geneva Convention, the use of flashbang grenades and tear gas canisters that burn at really, really high temperatures, that burned a hole through the AstroTurf at the soccer field at Cal Anderson Park. People there just relaxing also got attacked. These devices are really dangerous, and they pose a threat to public safety, Jeff. So that's my message to the Public Safety Committee of the Seattle City Council is, if you want to protect public safety, then stop using these devices.
Amen to that. Talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. I'm intrigued by, if you're seeing, in comparison to some other protests and to the sort of the Bernie movement event at Safeco Field there back in 2016, are there more high school because we're hearing from people all around the country, from the hometown that I'm in here in southeastern Massachusetts to places like Lafayette, California, just outside of the Bay Area in San Francisco. High school students are leading the charge here. I mean, these are 16, 17-year-olds, 15-year-olds in some cases that are kind of organizing. And is that similar in Seattle? Is it more college kids? What have you been able to observe there?
Yes, it's definitely mostly young people, and I've come to calling it the Pink Umbrella Riot movement, because it all started not yesterday, but a week from yesterday, when a police officer attacked a pink umbrella at the police line, and ever since then, people have just refused to back down. So the symbol for the movement now in Seattle is the pink umbrella, so you'll see that a lot of images of the pink umbrella. I'm very proud that I helped name this movement, but it was very obvious to me that the pink umbrella was the reason for all of this, that one act by the police officer, which ended, unfortunately, that day with, once again, tons of pepper spray being used. But yeah, a lot of young people involved in this movement. Of course, people of color, it's a Black Lives Matter movement, for sure. There's a lot of talk about racism and colonization and a lot of issues that people have just not wanted to face in, neoliberal Seattle or so-called progressive Seattle. And now the city council and the community as a whole have got to deal with this stuff. But in general, I see a lot of young people, a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of spirit. There's a band here called the Martial Law Band. It's actually MARSHAL, but the Martial Law Band is, I've always been impressed by their music, and they've performed at one of my favorite clubs, The Nectar, on some of our great shows there. But they've been out in front of the crowd performing. Wow. So the music is represented there. I do see it as kind of there is a sense of sort of a rock festival sort of happening at Cal Anderson Park. By the way, highly organized, Jeff. Like, the local businesses and local residents have donated so much food, so much water, face masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, anything you can think of. There are medic stations set up in the park. There are all sorts of stands and places where you can get supplies, where you can relax and
well, is this sort of organic in the sense that these individuals, or it was I know that Durkan isn't the most popular person right now in the city, the mayor, but were people guided by mayor and the city council and other agencies to be able to pick up these free supplies?
No, it's just totally organic. It's just something
that's
that
fantastic.
People have done.
That's right.
And there is a heart to Seattle that I'm seeing that people were beginning to wonder about with all this influx of corporate money and the billion-dollar corporate headquarter developments and Google and Amazon and the rest, and the money that they've thrown at the city council during elections. But there really is a spirit and a heart to Seattle that was there during the music scene in the heyday and is still there today, where people are taking care of each other. They're proud of their community. They're proud of their progressive politics. They're ready for change. They want to be the vanguard for change. They're really happy that the Seattle Police Department has decided to stop attacking them and moved away from the East Precinct. They consider that a huge victory. This idea of autonomous zones apparently is not just happening in Seattle. But yeah, there's a spirit out there of movement. That's what we'll call it, is movement. Things are changing, and people are ready for it because along the way we've seen some real ups and downs. It's been a crazy roller coaster ride in Seattle. It went from one day to the next. We weren't sure whether this was going to be a complete police state and the city government was losing control of the police department, or whether the people were finally going to have their say. And it looks like at the moment, at least, the police finally got the message that having, ongoing running battles with protesters is probably not good for anyone.
Right, no doubt. We're talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show, and I'm wondering if you could give us a description of what the East End is. Is this the predominantly African American section of Seattle, or is it a university section? What is the sort of demographic breakdown there?
Well, it's mostly the city park. Non-residential areas, because where it's situated is on Capitol Hill. It includes the area, part of the block where the East Precinct is located. That's been surrounded by protesters since police retreated from it yesterday. But mostly Cal Anderson Park. So this is Capitol Hill, a traditional gay community in Seattle, traditional progressive, artsy sort of community in Seattle. It is borders with the Central District, which has always had a large black population. It's in the middle of the city. It's the most highly dense populated neighborhood, north of San Francisco, from what I've been told. So we're talking about 100,000 people in that area, and they're mostly very, very, very much the majority, very supportive of the protesters, and so all of the supplies are coming from local businesses. So here's the thing. The mayor and the police chief are telling us they've got to deploy tear gas because, there's been damages to businesses and things. And granted, on Saturday when this all started, over a week ago now, there was damage to a lot of property, and there were windows broken and things in downtown Seattle. Cars were set on fire. It was crazy. Okay? But now we're up on Capitol Hill, and there has been some vandalism during the confrontations between police and protesters. But at the moment, you have local businesses who had set up, like there was a hot dog stand set up at the police line. Literally at the police line. And they were called Dirty Dogs. And people were buying hot dogs, and all the local stores, the Ranchero, I think is what it's called, the Mexican restaurant right there off of 11th Avenue and Pine Street in Seattle, was doing great business, staying open late because people were coming in to get their takeout orders and things, and the protesters are hungry. Okay, here's the thing. Some businesses have decided to open their doors and allow people to use public restrooms. The Vermilion Bar, which is one of my favorite places, it's a bar/art gallery where a lot of my friends show their art and my friends DJ and perform music. That place is owned by an artist, and she has used it as a central staging area for all sorts of supplies for the protesters. So they're getting a lot of support from the community. Local businesses, local residents have even opened some of their homes during the marches and said, if you guys need to come in, and use bathrooms, because there's been a lack of public restrooms, of course, in the city for many reasons. The city was under curfew. The businesses are still coming from phase 1 of the pandemic recovery. So there's a lot going on, and the community has really shown its courage, its spine, its its love for justice and equality by saying we support the protesters. And all I can say is the police chief and the mayor are not very popular right now, and I wouldn't count on them having a great political career in this area at the moment.
Wow. Now, I'm trying to think now. When is Jenny Durkan up next?
Or not this year.
Right, not this year, right.
What are those, right?
Is it usually, it's usually, in a lot of cases, after the presidential cycle. I know New York is that way, and I think Boston is too. Not sure, because Seattle's governor is also up this year, so I'm not sure. I mean, Washington State's governor. By the way, has Jay Inslee weighed in on at all in this whole situation in Seattle?
Well, it's been the position, the public position at least, of the governor, the police chief, and the mayor to say, of course, that they support the right to protest publicly. And the governor had called out the National Guard. So the National Guard was involved in some of these confrontations with protesters. As far as I know, he has not been as much of a public face in what's been going on here in Seattle, because he's been more concerned about dealing with the COVID relief efforts. But Jenny Durkan has definitely become sort of the symbol for... So this is... Okay, the Seattle elections are next year, so 2021.
Right. That makes sense, and of course, she's got herself now an uphill battle after not really dealing with this. I mean, when you're pepper spraying fellow city councilors like Miss Sawant, that's another point, another time, and what is going on. We just have a couple of minutes here, Mark, but are you, I think with a lot of our listeners, callers to the show, they are somewhat buoyed by this youthful brigade across the country, again, that has given us change already in Minnesota, even if it ends up being only a slight change, but just amazing to do this in 10 days or so is pretty remarkable. Is that your thoughts and what you are hearing on the streets, that young people can make change reminiscent of the 1960s and the Vietnam and civil rights movements?
I can tell you this, that some of the issues that haven't been dealt with for the last 20 years that resulted from incidents during the WTO protests here in Seattle about police brutality and violations of civil rights, racial profiling. The Seattle Police Department was reviewed by the Department of Justice after allegations of excessive use of force and racial profiling. None of that was dealt with directly by any of the leaders in the city. And now, finally, at least the city council has come around to thinking that we need serious change. And it has to happen now. This is not something that we can put off till the next generation or the next election cycle. It has to happen now. And I think that's exactly what I'm hearing too. Movement before. The protesters are there on the street to remind them. And if you want to see some of the videos, go to my YouTube channel, Mark Taylor-Canfield, and check out Democracy Watch News as well. I'll be covering this heavily on Twitter as things unfold, because I'm sure we haven't seen the end of the story yet. And on Monday, the City Council will be voting on whether to ban tear gas. So that'll be very good. Right,
we'll keep fighting for us, Mark. We'll talk to you next Tuesday, if not before then. Keep on fighting as well. I want to thank Ron Crider for producing this broadcast. I want to tell everybody not to give up. We got some momentum here, folks. Keep on fighting. Tell your kids, if you have them, or if you are a kid yourself, do the right thing. My name is Jeff Santos, and right now it is my time to say, I gotta go!
Live in beautiful downtown Boston, this is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Now, here's Jeff.
It is hour 2 of the Jeff Santos Show, and welcome to it. Coming to you live from the South Coast here in southeastern Massachusetts. We'll be talking to my good friend Robert Craig, Wisconsin Citizen Action, at the bottom of the hour. But we start this hour talking about Well, all the issues we've been discussing over the past week or so with a candidate for Congress, but he's just not any old candidate. He's an old friend of mine from the days when yours truly was a volunteer for the Gary Hart campaign back in the 1980s for president. He himself has been a real fighter for public service, AmeriCorps, City Year. It's his baby. And, of course, he is now running for Congress in the 4th Congressional District, the old Joe Kennedy seat. Mr. Kennedy, of course, now is running for U.S. Senate. A good friend, could be Representative Alan Casey, joins as candidate for the 4th Congressional District. Alan, great to have you back on the program.
Jeff, wonderful to be with you. You're doing such a great job of pushing great progressive issues.
Well, thank you, and that's our goal, that's our mission, and we're trying to expand our footprint to do just that over the coming weeks and months, which, of course, is going to be big for you, a September primary, and, of course, a November election. So, we wish you nothing but the best in that effort. Well, we've been talking about so many issues that, you have championed for a long time. And, when we were back in the day with Gary Hart, he would concern himself about the military footprint that we had. And, a lot of this comes down to, where we put our dollars. Do we continue to fund a military-industrial complex that then spends 60% of non-discretionary dollars to once again put us in another case of war, stop the Iran nuclear agreement as an example, creating more problems there, whether we put it into education or healthcare or whatever the case may be. But right now, of course, with what has happened over the last 10 days, and I want to get your general overall view of how America may have already changed in the last 10 days. But we're talking about, changing the way we do public safety. As a candidate for Congress, how do you look at the calls for defunding or reducing or changing, at the very least, the fundamental ways, particularly of big city police departments?
Yes, well, Jeff, thank you, and thank you for having me on again. I'll start with, and you referenced the Senator Gary Hart we both worked for. I want to start to step back and just talk about the moment in time, which I think is unprecedented. We are living through history right now. It's hard to understand that while you're in it, but now we have 3 crises intersecting, which I do think opens up an opportunity for big transformational progressive change we haven't seen since the New Deal. I think we are in a New Deal moment for our time because of the coronavirus first, the health pandemic, which then caused the economic crisis. And now on top of that, we have this race crisis, which honestly has been going on for 400 years, but is finally being made clear to white people. And as you know, I started City Year. Our principal goal was to help complete the civil rights movement by bringing people together. We have, the worst and best of times. The worst is we have this monster in the White House who refuses to use the federal government, whose whole modus operandi is divide and conquer, try to pit one group against the other. And the country has changed in the last 10 days, 12 days. It's beautiful. These extraordinary peaceful protests, largely multiracial, as President Obama said last week. This isn't the 60s, which was largely led by African Americans with some white allies. These are multiracial protests. Young people are leading a revolution in our streets, peaceful, thankfully. And I think that if you understand how to tap that energy, which I've been doing my whole life, we can get big transformational change. We can get universal national service, which I've been voluntary, which I've been pushing for 32 years. We need it now. We need it. Young people, we need 1 million young people in service to fight the coronavirus. We need the 300,000 contact tracers. We need an education corps. We need a new CCC for the 21st century. We need an opportunity corps to fight poverty. And most of all, we need a platform to bring people together from different races so we learn that our diversity is our strength. We need to deal with the economic crisis, I called for saving small businesses through direct payments, not relying on the banks, not relying on loans, using the Treasury, not the Small Business Administration. And we've seen the PPP program hasn't worked. 96% of African-American small business owners, 91% of Hispanic owners, majority of women owners have not gotten those because they don't have the big bank relationships. I wanted direct payments. I'm still working for that. In fact, Mark Warner introduced legislation based on the idea I championed, got 2 op-eds in Politico with Bernie Sanders and Doug Jones, as he said, the entire spectrum of the Democratic Party, saying we should pay people directly to stay in their jobs until the crisis is lifted. And I have other ideas on what to do about that. In terms of the race issue, and then I'll come to the allocation of resources, I've called for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I had the privilege of meeting Nelson Mandela. I was in South Africa the year after the Truth and Reconciliation was launched commission. I led the effort to work with South African leaders to develop city in South Africa. We need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission here so we can take this incredible energy but then use it to really share the stories and the pain of 400 years, but then get reforms. Now, those reforms need to be, including a reallocation of resources. We spend way too much money on our military. We have the most money, the next 8 countries combined. We are constantly building weapon systems, even ones that the Pentagon doesn't want for the last war. We have to reallocate. And in terms of local safety issues, we do have to have a reallocation of resources. We need to put more funding into national service. We need to put more funding into programs for young people, for after-school activities, for service activities. We need to put more funding into our education system, our public health system. So I do think that this is a wake-up call. And thankfully, because, as always, with young people leading, and, all big change starts with people at the grassroots and with people protesting. It's how our home country started. So I'm very enthusiastic about what's happening, and I think with the right leadership, we can seize this moment and have the kind of change we haven't seen in this country for 75 years.
Well, there's no doubt, and we need to go back to the New Deal. In my opinion, we also need to incorporate some of the things that people like LBJ was doing in JFK and, of course, Martin Luther King and all of that. And I think one of the areas, though, and I want to get your thoughts here, is how do we transform, the public safety piece? Because there's another case in New Jersey that happened about, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks ago of an individual who was unarmed, who was reportedly by the police officer reaching for his gun. That's why he shot and killed the individual. But the fact is, there's no evidence of that, and they're actually trying to get a discussion with the attorney of the slain victim. But it would seem to me that something big has to be done. Are you confident that, what hopefully will be your colleagues in Washington, which have been tepid in a lot of responses? I mean, Nancy Pelosi did not go along with the Progressive Caucus's leader and Jayapal, who wanted to do a very simple task that Germany has been doing for years. And I know you know of the idea of keeping people on their own payroll, even though there's like 120 sponsors or whatever. I'm just worried that a lot of the old-time leadership doesn't want to, move too fast, including Vice President Biden, who said he's against the idea of defunding police. Now, again, I and a lot of my contributors on the show, when we talk to progressive organizations around the country, we're for being realistic here, that we're not going to eliminate police departments, but we're going to eliminate the idea of the heavy elements of use of force, of having somebody who's having a domestic concern call out a police officer who comes in with a gun, or guns, if there are multiple officers, to solve something that could be resolved by a social worker or somebody who's a counselor. So there's a lot of different things here. But you're running for Congress. How do you look at, where we, focus on here? Because obviously, if you're listening to 15 to 30-year-olds, they want change, and they want to see something, particularly in the African-American communities, that is really a major difference than what they currently see.
Yes, well, Jeff, I think, it's all connected. And so I am in full support of the Justice and Policing Act, which the Democratic Party introduced yesterday, unified House and Senate. We need to take action. So as you said, we have to eliminate qualified immunity. We have to have national standards. We have to have a national database that tracks misconduct. We have to have departments liable when officers violate the rules. We have to have a massive criminal justice reform. We have to have better training. We have to move to more community policing, like Boston has done very effectively. There's a whole set of reforms, and now I think we are now building the support for that. But we have to go even beyond that. We need to end mass incarceration. We need to end private prisons. I mean, it's ridiculous that there are corporations literally making money off of keeping people in prison. Right. We need to ban the box. We need to have much more. We don't have a criminal justice system. We have a criminal punishment system. We have to have reentry programs so that we need to restore voting rights for people who've been incarcerated. We need to let them have Pell Grants so they can actually use their time to get educated, so when they come out they can get a job. There's a whole set of things we have to do. Part of the reason I'm calling for the truth and unfortunately, the bill that was introduced, which I think is a great bill, it goes part of the way. We need to do much more like these things I just mentioned, which is a larger issue. The reason I believe we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is that, the good news is, unfortunately this has been going on for 400 years. Now, because the brutal, merciless killing of George Floyd was captured on video thanks to that brave person with their iPhone. Right. So many people now, white people are seeing what African Americans have known since, forever. Every African American, a friend of mine who has kids, they have the talk, driving while black, now it's burning while black, walking in a neighborhood while black. They get it. But now white people are being enlightened because of the video. And the good news is they're showing up. But the reason I want the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa did this, we have to have a systematic way for people to learn the truth. My friend Brian Stevenson created the Peace and Justice Memorial, which is to honor and to share the history of over 4,000 people being lynched in this country, long after the Civil War. And what he has said, you have to get proximate, and first you have to share the truth, and then you get to reconciliation and reform. And I think if we do that, we will actually build a multiracial coalition that will also include some conservatives so that we can actually get these policies done. I mean, already Republicans are pushing back on what the Democrats introduced yesterday. And so that part of the reason I want to do that is it's systematic. It can be a combination of truth and reconciliation and what the Kerner Commission did 50 years ago, which said we're leading to two societies, one white, one black. Well, guess what? That's where we are. We have to build the support. And honestly, you need people in Congress who know how to leverage this energy, which is what I've been doing my whole life. I beat Tom DeLay when he tried to kill the AmeriCorps program by building a grassroots movement to say, yes, 15 to 30-year-olds, again, I've got two teenage children. My daughter just graduated from Brookline High. My son turns 12 this Saturday. They get it. They're way ahead. Their generation just is and they're showing up. And so I think we have to go much farther, but we also have to have a strategy that moves the protest action, which is very important, to actual policy change.
Talking with Alan Casey. He is, of course, candidate for Congress in the 4th Congressional District here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Again, you can listen to this interview on Revolution Radio Network. We replay the 3 o'clock hour at 6 o'clock, the 4 o'clock hour, of course, right now, at 7 p.m. And, of course, you can always find a podcast half hour after the broadcast right on the Revolution Radio Network. And, of course, our friends listening to us at AM 1530 WVBF in Middleborough, Taunton, can obviously continue to listen to the broadcast until 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Let me ask you, Alan, a lot of people are focused on a number of things that kind of go along with what you've been doing for City Year. Bernie Sanders has issued the idea of free public university. Elizabeth Warren, of course, right here in Massachusetts, has had a college debt program, ending college debt. Where are you on that issue? Because that parlays very much in what City Year and Bill Clinton's AmeriCorps and others are connected with here, and how you connect those dots.
Sure, Jeff. Thank you. So I have a new idea. Well, actually, I've been pushing it for a while, but I actually think it's doable now, because I think we need to seize this, what I think is a New Deal moment. So here's my idea. I want to create something called Restore the Dream accounts. The way it would work would be like this. When a child's born in this country, the government puts into a children's savings account $15,000, paid for by the estate tax, by the way, which has no mission. And every time the Republicans get in there, they call it the death tax and they cut it. It has no mission. I want to give it a mission. I basically want to say to the wealthiest people in this country who benefited the most from what an amazing country America is, to say, okay, fine. You can keep half your money for your kids, but the other half is going to go to every other young person in this country. You start with $15,000 at birth. By the time that young person is 19, on just standard average market returns from 529 accounts, you may be familiar with those. Those are for college savings, which largely benefit the upper middle class and upper class now, who can afford to put the savings aside. It's worth $50,000. Now, and if a family contributes $500 a year, which is about $1.35 a day, it's worth $65,000 by the time that young person is 19 years old. But here's the kicker for me: to get the $50,000. The money that has been invested by the federal government, which represents all of us, you have to do just 1 year of national service. And I want to expand the use. I want these to be dream accounts. It's basically to give every young person access to the American dream. You could use it to pay for college if you want. If you're going to college, the average college debt right now is $33,000. So you could pay off college debt and still have money left. You could use it to do apprenticeship programs. Not everybody goes to college. A lot of my Italian side of my family have not gone to college, and they're entrepreneurs. They own small businesses. They're carpenters. They're funeral directors, etc. You could use it for apprenticeship programs, good union apprenticeship programs. You could use it for job training programs. You could use it, like the old GI Bill, for the down payment for your first home. Because if you don't have assets, how do you get that money? You could use it for lifelong learning. My kids are going to have 10 to 12 jobs minimum. So you could use your dream account, which you carry for the rest of your life, to say, let's say you get to be 28 and you want to move into a new career and you need $3,000 to take a course at Bristol Community College to get recertified. Well, you could tap your dream account. You could also use it for emergencies, like healthcare emergencies, housing emergencies, your car breaks down. We're seeing this now with the coronavirus, which is attacking low-income people. Half our country is $500 away from a disaster, and guess what? We've had the disaster, and we have miles of people in food banks. You could use it for that. You could even use it for saving for retirement. And so I think this is a bookend to Social Security. So during the New Deal, elderly poverty was at the highest level. Well, the Democratic Party came up with Social Security, and guess what? It's now gone to the lowest level. We need to have a bookend. We need to have a jump start for young. What we're doing now is we're saddling our young people with this fiscal cliff of college debt. Instead, I want to give them a jump start on the American dream if they're just willing to serve for 1 year, which I think is a great bargain. And that's my plan to basically take on college debt and even more, solve the income inequality problem, because the reason we have income inequality is that low-income people have no assets. This will give every young person who serves for a year at least $50,000 to start their life.
Well, that's a really good idea. I want to ask you, though, do you believe, because I think what has happened here, private universities have held, the golden ticket, they say, Harvard, you can do whatever you want in life, right? But a state school, and there are some great ones. I think of the UC system in California, where our good friend Michael Dukakis teaches, and so forth, in the wintertime at Northeastern and my alma mater in the summer, and spring and fall months. And I feel that we need to really strengthen those. I don't know if your legislation and it concerns, whether it gives somebody just a free public university, education for 4 years, with the idea that they have to do public service, or that you just strengthen the entire public university system, which I think has taken a hit over the last, say, 40 years anyways, going back to Ronald Reagan. Your thoughts there?
Absolutely. Well, my daughter's going to Northeastern, which we're so proud of. That was her top choice. And we're thrilled. And Northeastern is such a great school because of the co-op. Yeah, it's an outstanding. We visited 14 schools. Northeastern was the first one, and every time we went to another school, said, now it goes to Northeastern. And we're so, she's a superstar, and she got in. So I love that school. And yes, But the other part of my plan would be for young people now that if you do a year of national service, you get the equivalent of 2 years of tuition at a public university, which right now the average is $11,200. So basically, if you're willing to serve for 2 years, you could serve your way to a debt-free education. So I have something for babies, because I think over time we do need this bookend of Social Security. We need something that gives everybody access. But in the short term, let's say for each year of service, you could get 2 years, or you could serve for 1 year, get that $22,000. The average debt, as I said, is $33,000. So then you'd emerge with, a manageable debt. I had, over $23,000 in debt when I graduated from law school. And it was manageable because, the other thing I want to do is refinance student loans. It's outrageous that big banks are making money off of this. In my day, there were guaranteed student loans that the interest rate was capped, and it was more manageable. I want to refinance student debt basically almost to zero because, right now interest rates are almost at zero. And if we did that, we could massively wipe out student debt. But larger point, I agree with you, Jeff. We have to reinvest in our public university system. We have to make sure that anyone who wants access to higher education can get it at an affordable rate. And this is also an economic engine, is our university system. Part of the reason, Greater Boston and even Massachusetts is doing so well is we have a much higher per capita access to higher education. The future of the economy is life sciences, it's tech, it's the knowledge industries, and we need to make it possible for every young person who aspires to that. Not everybody does. I also want to. We're seeing essential workers now. We have to value people. We have to have a rebalancing.
Well, I think that's really the big part of it, Alan. Unfortunately, we have about 60 seconds left here, but
Sure.
I want to give you the opportunity to give out your website and any other data you have if people want to reach you, want to donate to your campaign, etc.
Thank you, Jeff. So the website is alan@alankazei.com. It's hard to spell, ALANKHAZEI, or just KZ, the number 4C.com, KZ4Congress.com, KZ number 4C. And we have a grassroots campaign. We'd love you to say we have a KZ Corps that's doing volunteer work as well as doing voter outreach. We'd love you to join that. If you want to donate, obviously, we I'm not taking any corporate PAC or lobbyist money. I was one of the first congressional candidates 10 years ago to say I would do that, and I'm sticking with that. So, Jeff, it's
Alan,
great to be with you and with your listeners.
Good to be with you, my friend. All the best on the campaign trail. We'll look forward to talking to you between now and September. Check out his website, folks. Thank you, Alan. We're right back. It's the Jeff Santos Show. Back in a flash.